What's up? Hope you're doing well. Andy here from Drive Steady, and in this video I'm reviewing the new BMW M4 Competition. So listen up, the BMW M brand has been around for several decades now, and the car community has established a certain type of expectation from their products. So when BMW released this new version of the M4 Competition, it had many people scratching their head, specifically about the design. But if you take a closer look, a lot of the same M characteristics you're used to are still here. For example, wide body, check. An inline 6-cylinder engine, check. M-specific quad exhaust tips, check. It even has those cool looking M mirrors. So the question I'm asking myself is, why is everyone freaking out about the new M4? Oh gosh, oh this is embarrassing. Not again. Much better. So anyways, maybe I'll figure it out in this video, but M cars have always been about the driving experience, and as cars are best represented by the sum of all their parts working together and not one individual piece. I'm going to try and find out if that's still the case in this review of the new BMW M4 Competition. Okay, so let's start the review off by talking about the exterior of the BMW M4, and let's get two things out of the way really quickly. The first thing you're going to notice when you see the M4 is how much bigger it is. It's actually 4.6 inches longer, 1.5 inches wider in the track. The wheelbase is almost 2 inches longer, and it's a smidge taller than the prior generation of the M4. And at least to my eye, it makes this car practically the same size as my Shelby GT350, which by no means is a small car. And the second thing, and probably the most prevalent thing, or the most talked about thing about the M4, are the humongous kidney grills. And two things about the kidney grills. Number one, they look better in person. And number two, they look better and on a darker color paint like this Tanzanite blue color, which by the way reminds me a lot of the E46 M3 color carbon black. So going back to the kidney grills, yes, they're big, but they do look better in person. And number two, they look good against a darker color paint, so it contrasts against the black colored kidney grills. But overall, I think the kidney grills are not that bad, and the thing I take away from the front-end design of the M4, or the positive thing I take away from it, is that it still looks like a BMW. When I look at this thing, I think BMW M car. I don't think anything else, and I believe that that's really, really important. And I saw the same thing happen with the Chevrolet Corvette. When it went from the C7 to the C8 generation, obviously from front engine to rear engine, it had a radical design change. And when I saw it in person, I was thinking to myself, oh, what does this look like? And then I thought, wow, this looks like a Corvette. It doesn't look like anything else. It doesn't look like a Ferrari. It doesn't look like a Lamborghini. It looks like a Corvette. And I think that deserves a lot of credit on BMW's part for making such a big, drastic, I don't know how many more words I can use to describe it, design change, especially on something so iconic like the kidney grills, and still maintain the nature of a BMW design. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and give you some more details about the front end of this design. So starting off with the headlights resemble the 8 Series headlights much more than they do the 3 Series. Typically in the past, BMW resembled the Coupe or the 4 Series much closer to the 3 Series, and I think that's now gone away, and the 4 Series Coupe resembles the 8 Series Coupe a little bit more now. So these headlights are all LED. The running lights are actually fiber optic and look really cool. This car has the optional matrix laser lights, which can be distinguished by the blue trimming you see here. And overall, like I said, the headlight looks really nice. Then let's come down to the bumper. The bumper, I'm glad to say, is all functional, and as a result of these humongous kidney grills, the M4 is probably not going to have any cooling issues. This is a competition package car, so it does have extra coolers up here to make sure the engine, the transmission, and all of the mechanical pieces are functioning at an optimal temperature. Otherwise, the front bumper does have a slight integration of a spoiler, nothing add-on. I'm assuming that'll probably come in the more racier versions of the M4, but that's the front end. Now let's look at the side profile of the M4. Alright, so now you're looking at the side profile of the M4, and from this angle, at least in my opinion, is where you can really see the size of the M4 and how much it's increased. The wheels are much farther apart. As a matter of fact, I thought I read somewhere saying that the wheelbase of this car is now longer than a Mustang GT, and that's kind of hard to believe, but anyway, this car has grown in size, and more size usually means more weight, and this car has gone up in weight too. So almost 3,900 pounds, 3,880 pounds to be exact, with the automatic 8-speed transmission. If you get the manual, it's 50 pounds less, but since this is the competition package, the automatic is the only choice we've got here. Now let's jump into a little bit of the design. A couple notable things to note here: the M4 side sill over there on the wide body, that looks really cool. And then you've obviously got the M mirrors here, which have a 2-prong design. They look really nice. As a part of the competition package, they are painted in black to give a nice contrast to the blue color paint. And then you've got the carbon fiber roof, which made its appearance in the M3 at the then called M3 Coupe in the E92 generation, and continues here 2 generations afterwards. It's got a bubble design where you've got these smooth lines that flow from the hood onto all the way to the back of the car. The carbon fiber roof is standard, but if you wanted a moonroof, you can certainly do that, but keep in mind you will lose the carbon fiber roof if you go with the moonroof. Okay, now let's talk about the wheels, tires, and brakes of this BMW M4. Starting off with the suspension, you get a standard adaptive M suspension, which is always great because not only is it a performance enhancing feature, but it gives you the ability to adjust the character or the ride of your M4 depending on the scenario or the surface that you're driving on. Now let's talk about the wheels. In typical M fashion, you get staggered wheels. In stock form, they're 18 inches up front and 19 in the rear. These are the optional wheels. The wheels as a part of the competition package, you get 19 inches up front and 20 inches in the rear. These are really cool looking wheels. They're forged, and they do have a slight resemblance to the 666M wheels that you saw in the prior generation of the M4. Now let's talk about the tires. These are 275/35 up front and 285/30 in the rear. They are a Pirelli P0 tire, which I'm kind of surprised about because typically you see Michelin tires, Michelin Cup 2s or Michelin Pilot 4S tires, and not that there's anything wrong with the Pirellis, it's just something I noticed and wanted to point out. Next, let's talk about the brakes in the front. They are 15-inch rotors being bitten onto by a 6-piston caliper that is painted in red. You have the option of painting these in black or blue. In the rear, you've got 14.6 inches and the same red brake caliper with a single floating piston back there. You do have the ability to get carbon fiber or carbon ceramic brakes. Those are 15.7 inches up front and I believe 15 inches in the rear, but the steel brakes are more than adequate. Now the interesting thing about these brakes is that you have the ability to change the feel. There's 2 settings, one is comfort, one is sport, and I'll talk more about those or the feel of those during the driving portion of the review. But this was the first time I'd ever seen a car that gives gives you the ability to change the brake feel. So those are the wheels, tires, and brakes of the M4 Competition. Now let's go around back, take a look at the rear, and listen to the exhaust. All right, now let's talk about the rear end of the M4, and I'm going to put something out there right up front. I think the front of this car looks better than the rear end design of this car. And the reason why I think that is, when I see it in person, that's just what I feel. And the reason for that is because I think there's too much going on back here. The lines, the vertical lines going down across the bumper, and then the taillights, I feel like it doesn't look right, and I don't know if BMW is going to change it as a part of the refresh. Probably not, but I'm a little weird as far as design goes. But anyway, now let me give you some of the details like I typically do. You've got a spoiler here that's painted in black. It's very subtle and it contrasts nicely against the paint. You've got an M4 badge, a huge BMW logo here. And let's talk about the trunk space. So you have three ways of opening the trunk. There's a button on the key, there's a button on the interior, and then there's also a button right here underneath that big BMW logo. The nice thing about the trunk is that it opens by itself, which is always a great convenience feature. And then when you look inside the trunk, you are greeted with a pretty big amount of space. I could easily see you fitting two larger pieces of luggage in here and maybe a third airplane size carry-on bag. So there's plenty of storage here. You do even have the ability to fold down the rear seats. There are these little toggles here or pull switches that you can use to fold down the rear seats, giving you even further or even more space to store your stuff. Now, as far as closing the trunk goes, you guys know how I'm pretty picky about grab handles and putting my palm on the exterior paint. Well, I don't have to worry about any of that because this has a self-closing feature. It's got two buttons. Number one, you push this one on the left and that'll close it. You push the one on the right that has the little lock symbol, that'll close it and lock all of your doors. So that's nice. You want to close your trunk and just walk away, you just use this button here on the left. All right, so now let's talk about the exhaust. But before doing that, let me talk about this diffuser. It's a rather aggressive looking diffuser. It does have four prongs, one on each side of the exhaust, and I think it looks pretty good. Next, let's talk about the exhaust. So you do see that the hallmark of the Quad M exhaust is still alive here in this generation of the M4, and that's wonderful. Then let's talk about the exhaust tips. So these are 100mm tips, 4 inches, and they're painted in black. And the interesting thing about the exhaust pipe itself is that it's almost the same size as the exhaust tips. Typically what you see is an exhaust tip that's so much smaller, and then the manufacturer puts a nice big exhaust tip to make the car look more sporty, but you're not seeing that here. It's a pretty hefty sized exhaust pipe coming out from the mufflers. About the muffler, I'm glad to say that the can or the muffler underneath the diffuser is less visible, contrasting to what you saw in prior generations of the M3 and the M4, where the exhaust muffler or the can underneath the diffuser would be so visible, it's just like a sore thumb. You can still see it, but it's better. Anyway, the most important thing about the exhaust is what it sounds like. So let's take a listen. All right, so you had a chance to hear the exhaust. Now let's go ahead and talk about the engine details. So this is called the S58 motor from BMW. It's a 3-liter twin turbocharged inline 6-cylinder engine making 503 horsepower and 479 pounds-feet of torque. This represents an increase of 59 horsepower and 73 pounds-feet of torque over the prior M4 Competition. So it's a pretty hefty jump from generation to generation. As far as the transmission goes, you have the 8-speed automatic only in the Competition model, and this is an automatic. It's not a DCT. It's not what you saw in the prior generation, and this is kind of a surprising move for me from BMW. Typically when you get sporty oriented cars, the dual clutch is a little bit more suited as far as feel goes, at least in my opinion. But anyway, if you go down to the base level, you do have the option for a 6-speed manual. Now, my opinion about that is that eventually through the life cycle of the M4 and in the M3, I think you'll see the automatic be available in the lower level trim as well. But that's just foresight. I don't know anything. I don't have an insider with BMW. That's just how I envision the product line going to sell units later on down in the life cycle. Next, let's talk about the drivetrain, or the rest of the drivetrain. So this is a rear-wheel driven car as standard, but BMW has promised to give us a all-wheel drive driven car, albeit all-wheel drive driven, still rear-wheel drive bias. Next, let's close it off with the engine design. I do think that the prior generation did look better because it had like that carbon fiber structural piece going around the engine, but this does have structural pieces. They're just in metal. Maybe they're saving the carbon fiber bits for later on, or for a more sportier version of the M4. And then as far as the 0 to 60 time goes, it's 3.8 seconds in the automatic, 4.1 seconds in the manual. Of course, the manual is typically slower, and it's available in the trim that has less horsepower, so check your expectation there. But those are pretty much the details of the engine. Now let's move to the interior of the M4. All right, so now we're on the interior of the M4, so let's talk about the interior. So some of the details, starting off with the seat. So this seat is probably one of the coolest looking seats I have seen in quite a long time. They have carbon fiber here in between your legs. The entire back portion of the seat is carbon fiber, and they have multiple materials. So you've got leather, you've got Alcantara or Sway, and it just looks really, really cool. Now, as far as the feel goes, how does it feel? It's not the most comfortable seat, and I don't think it's aimed for comfort, or it's not, the purpose of it is not comfort. If you wanted the more comfortable seat, just get the base seat. That will most likely feel more comfortable than this. But as far as its purpose, the aggressiveness of this seat is very high. The thigh bolsters are very high. They're not adjustable, but they're very high, and they keep you snug in place. The side bolstering is adjustable, and it's, again, like the thighs, very, very snug. I do feel, at least for my body size, they expand. When you fully expanded them, they're extremely tight. But again, this is not made for one body size. Now, my complaints about this seat. Number one, they're not the most comfortable. I would say maybe a 3 out of 5. And the second thing, and this is really weird just for me, the side portion here, it goes up really high, and I feel like it pinches me or dives into my lat muscles on the side of my body. So when I'm sitting here, it just feels kind of weird a little bit. But again, that's just for my body size. That's what I'm feeling as I'm sitting here. So there you go. That's the $3,800 or $3,900 seat. Now let's talk about the steering wheel. So this is a typical M steering wheel with some slight differences. The things you're used to is the thickness. It is a thick wheel. The M cross-stitch pattern, which is always nice. The M1 and M2 buttons, which you saw in the previous generations, but now they look a little different. They have red indicators, and they stick out like little antlers for the wheel. And then the things you see different, heated wheel. So this is something I hadn't seen in the prior generation, the M4. And you've also got these carbon fiber pieces, which look very, very cool. I know this is an additional piece because there's a carbon fiber in the rest of this interior, which is included as a part of what you see here on the wheel. And then the paddle shifters. This is a big departure from the prior generation. They're very big. Again, they're carbon fiber. The indicators for upshifts and downshifts are in red. The backings are in red. There's a nice texture back here to give you a feel. But anyway, that's the wheel, the paddle shifters. It's actually really cool looking. Now let's move to the gauge cluster. So this is a fully digital gauge cluster. It's typical to what you see in most, if not all, other BMWs. The nice thing about it, it does have a lot of information in there, and on top of that, it's nice because you don't have to pay attention to any of that. You can just use it like a regular gauge cluster. The nice thing about a good gauge cluster is it'll give you a lot of information, but get out of your way if you don't want to see any of it. And you also see that in the infotainment as well, which I'll get to here next. And as far as the information it gives you, there's a lot of stuff in here. It'll give you your power, your torque, your boost pressure, your tire temperature, your PSI, everything you need to know so you can keep your eye on the road and not have to toggle through menus inside your infotainment screen. Next, let's talk about the head-up display. This car has two views for the head-up display. There's the regular view that you see in day-to-day driving, and then when you switch it to sport mode or race mode or track mode or whatever you want to call it, it does get quite bigger, and it changes to a rev counter with a speedometer in the bottom portion of the head-up display. But it's clear, it's clean, it's easy to read, and it's not intrusive. So now let's come to the infotainment screen. So the infotainment screen is, again, what you see in all other BMWs, and I like this unit a lot for the same reasons I like the gauge cluster. It's very easy to use, and it gives you the ability to customize it to your needs. So what I mean by that, on the main screen here, you have this button here in the top left-hand corner that allows you to customize what you want to see. You want to see the nav, your radio, your communication on your main screen? That's fine. If you want to remove the communication and add the date, that's also fine. So BMW gives you infinite customization here. And as far as scrolling through, looking for information, it's a tablet style. You just swipe to the right, and here are my settings for my car. I can just click on it and it'll take me to the menu. I can easily adjust it. Then when I want to go back, I just hit back. The engine data, all this stuff is there, and it's all customizable. I do not have to go deep into the menus, even though this BMW infotainment system, which is the latest version 7.0 by the way, if you were keeping track, is very deep, and there's a lot of stuff in here. But the nice thing about it is you don't have to mess with any of it. You just put the stuff you want there on the main menu, scroll to the left, scroll to the right, and you don't have to dig into all this stuff. One cool thing I noticed is that this car has the ability to lock and unlock itself as you walk towards or walk away from the car. This is the first time I had seen that in any car, so that's always nice. Now let's come down to the rest of the interior. In this middle portion here, you have a very busy area with a bunch of buttons. So let me give you how the transmission selector works first. So you put your foot on the brake, you start off in neutral, you push it once to the right, that'll put you in drive. You push up and down to select your gears if you wanted to shift with the shifter down here in the console. You move it to the left, that'll put you in neutral. You move it all the way to the left and up, that'll put you in reverse. So, but it's very easy to use. Then when you want to put it in park, there's a button right here, you push that. To the left of that, there's another toggle switch that allows you to change the aggression of the gear shifts. This car has one of the cooler cameras that I've seen. You can see here that there's a picture of your car in the video screen here, or in the infotainment screen here, and there's multiple different camera angles you can select to see around your car, not just from a top view, which is also very helpful. So this is one of the better safety features in this car. The camera system works very, very well. Now in the back seat, this is a coupe, but I did find it surprising that I am able to fit back there pretty good. My head doesn't really touch the top of the sloping roof back there, which is always a plus. But again, if you want a four-door version of the M4, just buy the M3. So that's pretty much my opinion of the interior. Now let's go to the driving portion of the review. Alright, so now the driving portion of the review, and as always showing you what the key looks like. Just a regular BMW key. The only thing that distinguishes or maybe gives you a message that this is a M key are these M colors here, but otherwise it has a nice weight, but it's a very underwhelming key. Doesn't really tell me that it's an M4. Anyways, visibility out front is very good. Visibility to the sides are also very good. I have blind spot monitoring. The 360 camera that I showed you is fantastic. So I do not have any safety concerns in this car. It seems like BMW has really loaded this thing up with a lot of safety features. Now, as far as the price goes, the M4 Competition base price, I believe, is about $73,000 or $74,000. And the way this car is optioned is about $85,000 or $86,000. So it's pretty expensive. If you factor in California tax, if you are financing this car, you're well into the $90,000 range. And for some people, that's, I don't know, Porsche 911 money. So It'll be interesting to see what this car drives like and how it compares to the competition. So let's go ahead and turn this thing on and take it for a drive. All right, so let's go ahead and put our seatbelt on and start-stop button in red. Fires up. The exhaust is at startup. So let's go ahead and put this in. Let's turn the exhaust on. And because I'm gonna come out to a straight stretch of road, let me go ahead and do my setup here for the car. So let's go to Sport Plus engine. Chassis, I like leaving it in sport. Steering comfort, brake also in comfort, which I'll go over here in a second as to why I like those settings. But the reason I need those settings is because I'm going to do a quick launch control. So immediately as I set off here, the driving position is good. It doesn't feel like I'm in like some humongous car. Even though the M4 has grown in size, it still somewhat wraps around you. So let me go ahead and do this thing I need to do for launch control to be enabled. So what I read is you have to turn traction control off. All right, and then you put it in the fastest shifting mode, which I am in. Foot on the brake all the way. Yeah, it's very quick. I don't think I was able to engage the launch control, but I did just use my foot brake gas method to get it going, and I've got somebody walking in front of me here, so let them get by. And let's go ahead and get that again. Acceleration. You do have to be conscious of the rev limiter because it'll bounce up, and as you can see, I'm bouncing off the limiter and it's killing the power, and I'm getting a kind of a deceleration. I'm losing the acceleration feel, and the car is also not accelerating as well. It's killing the gas, and yeah, you just need to be conscious of the shift lights, which are very helpful, and I'm not paying attention to them. That's why I keep bouncing off the limiter. So now, oh, these people, everybody's passing in front of me right now. Guy on the bike now. All right, so let's get down into first. Let's go now. Let's do it again. All right, much better. Yeah, bounced it off again. When you get the shifts right, the acceleration is very smooth and natural feeling. I didn't really get a lot of turbo lag on that launch, which was very surprising, but overall the acceleration is pretty good. So now I am onto the straight stretch of road here. Let's do it again. This is from second. I did feel some turbo lag there. I'm getting the shifts right. It's decently fast. It's not like I'm gonna push you back in your seat fast, and for some reason it's not really engaging me or giving me like some tingly feeling like when I drove the Audi R8 with the exhaust. Maybe an exhaust mod is something this car needs, but the acceleration is adequate. It's not the fastest car, and it's not a slow car. I can put it to you that way. Now let me talk about some of the settings. I'm going to go ahead. So you've got engine, which I had in Sport Plus, and the chassis, I leave it in Sport because Sport Plus feels way too fake, and it just makes it way too bouncy in here. Even for performance driving, I felt that Sport mode was the right balance between just good enough for the street and way too harsh where it's just for the track. So I like it in sport mode. The steering, again, I like it in comfort mode because sport mode is way too harsh and way too heavy. Although I have to admit, the sport mode is better in this car as the highest setting as it is in other cars in their highest setting. So I think BMW has done a decent job. If you're somebody who likes sport mode driving, the sport mode is better, or let's say less fake or less artificially weighted than other cars. And then the brake. So this was the most interesting thing for me, was the brake, because I have two settings for the brake. I have comfort and I have sport. Initially, when I tried messing around with them, I was like, oh wow, there's a really big difference. When I go into sport, the brake pedal becomes a lot more sensitive. I don't have to press on it, almost like a little bit of a light tap gives me a lot of brake power. But in comfort mode, it feels the most natural in comfort mode. You don't have to adjust, you just get in. If you leave it in comfort mode, it kind of, your brain is dialed in for that type of feel on comfort mode. But as far as the performance goes, I did drive it on some back roads off camera, and it does feel really good. The suspension is compliant. It does handle bumps very well. This is obviously a very sophisticated car nowadays. Uneven pavements don't really upset cars, so this is a really nice performance riding car. What about the daily drivability? After all, this is almost a $90,000 BMW, and BMW is becoming more and more synonymous with luxury and comfort nowadays, as opposed to performance and motorsport. But this is an M4. The suspension, if you put it in comfort mode and in efficient mode, everything in kind of the cush mode, it does become pretty soft. It's not the hardest thing, and that's good, but it does maintain a level of stiffness that reminds you that, hey, you're not driving a regular 4 Series. The suspension, it does put it in automatic mode. Let it shift by itself. That's one of the nice things about the automatic. But yeah, it does remind you that you're in an M4, but at the same time, it is dual nature in the way that you can drive it on a day-to-day basis, and you can go ahead and take it on a back canyon road and carve some corners with it, and it'll take it just fine. So overall, this car is a really, really good car. And the reason why it's a really good car is because it does the M philosophy very, very well. It's a great performance car for the segment. It's, like I said, it's not going to blow your head off with unbelievable acceleration. After all, it's just a little bit over 500 horsepower, and it is pretty heavy. But it's going to give you the right amount to tickle your urge. And the flip side of that is, this has to be a dual purpose car. You need to be able to drive it on a day-to-day basis. You need to be able to have all the creature comforts that people demand nowadays. It's not all about harsh edge, no air condition, no radio anymore. Those days are slowly going away, and people are demanding the creature comforts that you see nowadays with blind spot monitoring and 360 cameras and self-driving. Who knows, maybe in the next M4 you'll just take your hands off the wheel and this thing will start driving. So it does do both of those things very well. And as far as the design goes, as I said at the outset, it is a polarizing design, but I do think that it looks like a BMW, and to me, or like a BMW M car, and to me, that's the most important thing about a BMW M car, is that it has that characteristic. It has all of the things that you like to see in a BMW. I think BMW has done a decent job, and I think as this design matures and people start getting used to it, people are going to say, oh, it's not that bad. And maybe during the refresh, they change some things around, and I think I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this car is probably going to be one of the more popular BMWs or BMW M4s because of those kidney grills, like 20, 30 years down the road, when we're all driving flying cars and electric cars are basically ruling the world. Anyway, so those are my overall thoughts. If I didn't answer any questions for you, please send me a comment down below or send me a message on Instagram at Drive Steady. But thank you for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.